Thank you for tuning in to Uncommon Women, a podcast that provides a platform for women of all walks of life to share their upbringings, life lessons learned, experiences, and journeys to come. Uncommon Women speaks on topics that can relate to all women. We share, we listen, we laugh, we cry, and we empower each other to be the best uncommon woman that they can be. Ultimately, we are cultivating a global movement of women supporting women. Women supporting entrepreneurship, relationships, self-love, and so much more. We inspire each other to make an impact on this world for the better. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to Uncommon Women. Now, finally, grab a seat, get comfortable, and hear from your wonderful hosts, Shanira and Jenny Lee. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Uncommon Women. I'm Shanira.
And I'm Jenny Lee.
And today we have an amazing guest speaker that's going to hit the stage in just a few. We have an amazing speaker by the name of Todd, who is a business owner, author, father, mentor. And today he's going to be sharing his testimony and how he transformed his life from once being involved in the streets to now walking in his purpose. So thank you so much, Todd, for coming on today, Uncommon Women, and being a part of us. Before we get into your journey and your testimony, can you tell us a fun fact about yourself?
Well, let me start by saying it is an honor to be here. I'm very flattered. A fun fact about me, I'm a really good singer. I really can sing. I had a passion for singing. I was just always afraid to step out of my comfort zone. It's like something you just got to trust me on. I'm not going to sing for you. Like
I was about to say, that was next. I was going to say, are you going to hit us with a twinkle twinkle today, or
like,
we just
like I've been writing music since I was like 13 years old. But wow. Yeah, it's a fun fact. Yeah. Okay, I'm the real Chris Brown.
I'm not going to hear you sing. I'm just saying, like, when
one
you're
day
going to step into that purpose.
Maybe.
I agree with Shanira.
Okay, that's progress. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how was your life growing up?
Well, I grew up in a single parent household. Very, very toxic. At the time, when you're a kid, you kind of just perceive things and receive things as normal. It wasn't normal for me to, it wasn't normal for me to eat a box of Raisin Bran and think it's really raisins in it when it wasn't. My mother was very absent, very neglectful. My father was not in the picture until I was about 16 years old, and then he was killed by the Los Angeles Police Department. He was shot 38 times. My great-grandmother and a dear aunt of mine played a very key role in raising me because of my mother's neglect and abandonment. And, they did what they could. I'm the oldest sibling of 4 sisters. That was rough, being 10, 11 years old, making sure my sisters have something to eat, when my mom's nowhere to be found. Right. My childhood, it was pretty dark. It was pretty dark. I was that kid that felt like I was put here for no reason. I was that kid that felt like, if my own mom or, other family members I have in my family don't love me, like what, I'm worthless, which contributed to me acting out, to get attention, to have people look at me like, like prime example. I'm gonna give you prime example. I got in a lot of trouble in school, elementary, middle school, high school. And I loved that my name was called over the speaker when I got in trouble for the whole school to hear me. Like that's how bad it was. Because I just wanted to feel involved. I wanted to feel cared about. I wanted attention that I did not receive, that I should have received, growing up in the household that I grew up in, and it's there's certain things I'm still, working on healing from. We're all a work in progress, but my childhood contributes to me trying to be the person I knew I needed back then. you know, because I needed someone and I didn't have anyone. You know, my grandmother tried, my aunt tried, but they had, you know, things of their own to, you
Right.
know, deal with, and kids to raise, and, you know, a family to take care of, you know. But yeah, that was my childhood in a nutshell.
Oh,
Do you
wow.
feel like you had to grow up faster than normal children at the age of 10 and 11, to take care of your younger siblings?
Yes. Yes, very, very. There was very few fun in my life as a child. Very little fun. You know, I can't tell you how many times I burned myself on the stove trying to
Mm,
make a grilled cheese or something, you know, to put food in me and my sister's stomach. You know,
Wow.
my household, you had to fend for yourself, whether you was a child or not. You know,
Wow.
like you had to fend for yourself, which contributed to me. I had my first apartment, man, when I was like 17 years old. You
mm,
know, like, because I got tired of the environment. You know, I was forced to grow up when I shouldn't have been forced to grow up. You know,
right.
I should have more happy childhood memories. You know, but those are things I no longer resent because it contributed to who I am. It contributed to how self sufficient I am. It has contributed to my hustle as a small business owner. You know, it has contributed to my heart and how I care about other kids who go through this stuff that you might not see, you know, or they might not even know how to express. So, yes, I grew up very, very fast, by also by being exposed to a lot of things that I shouldn't have been exposed to. You know,
Hmm.
that kind of tainted and distorted my perception on love, relationships, support, care, you know, things that are really pivotal when being a human being.
Right. Taking a look back at your life now and, trial and error of trying to cook. Do you enjoy cooking now?
I don't. I still don't. I don't.
Wow.
I'm telling you right now, I could show you guys a screenshot of my debit card transactions for takeout,
Oh
and
my goodness.
it's ridiculous. I literally eat McDonald's for breakfast every single day.
Not good.
Wow.
Every
Yeah,
like
I could.
after this after this podcast, I'm going to order Domino's. Like, I'm going to get a Philly cheesesteak pizza with some habanero wings and a Pepsi. You know, and you know, it's crazy because, you know, I can laugh at stuff like that now, but
Mhm.
it also comes from, you know, an unhealed core issue and
Hmm.
things that I've been through, because like we were so broke, so poor. You know, now that, you know, the Lord has blessed me to be able to finance my eating habits, you know, like, I
Yeah.
spend a mass amount of money on food. Like, I really do. I really do.
Wow.
We gotta change that, especially if you got
And
kids.
My son is no better. My son is no better.
oh
He's
my
no better.
goodness.
I mean, I'm sure they enjoy
I,
it.
I,
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, there.
We got. Go ahead, Jenny.
I said I'm pretty sure they do enjoy it because nobody wants to cook. So the next best thing is just buying out. Like, hey, you don't gotta cook it, you ain't gotta make it, all you gotta do is pay for it.
Exactly. Kill two birds with one stone.
Yep.
I'm all about
Right.
working smarter, not harder.
Oh, okay, okay.
So as a kid, all right, let's get into, your lifestyle of being in the streets and how that transitioned. You said you got your own place at 17. How were you able to provide for your apartment at 17?
Well, I probably first started selling drugs at like the age of 13, 14.
Wow.
Wow, that's so young.
One of my uncles back then, he was renowned for being, you know, a gangster in our small community. And you know, it's crazy. I actually
Hmm.
remember, I have these memories of when I had to be maybe 7, 8 years old, of him sending me to houses with a vial of white stuff in it. And back
Wow.
then, I didn't know what it was.
Right.
Growing up, I found out it was crack cocaine. You know, like, so yeah, about the age of 13, 14, that's when I first started selling weed. You know, like I needed the the importance that money meant to me came early on, very early,
Okay.
too early. And I wish
Yeah.
it didn't. I
Mm-hmm.
really wish it didn't, you know, because I don't have anyone to get me the stuff that I need. You know, like I can't tell you how many times as a young kid that I'm out somewhere shopping and I don't even know my size. Like I don't even know what size I wear.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just buying stuff. You know, like so I was selling weed, you know, for a couple years at that, and then you know I did partake in other things. You know, like I'm not a I'm not proud of things that I've done, but I am no longer ashamed. You know, like I've
Mm-hmm.
committed robberies. I've robbed stores. I mean, at gunpoint. You know, I mean stuff like broad daylight, you know, hungry in the pit of my stomach, like, yo, I gotta make something happen. Nobody's going to make something happen for me, and that created this image of self-sufficiency in my head that really made me shut a lot of people out. You know, like I got to do this for myself, no one else has my back. I got to
Yeah.
do this, I got to do this. You know, so I mean in high school I'm wearing $800 pairs of jeans,
Wow.
$600 pairs of jeans. You know, like cuz by the time I got to high school I made my name, you know, made my traction in the streets. You know, back then, you know, anyone, if anyone knew me, they knew, you know, I'd either fight you or I'd shoot you, either or, you know, because something else that really messed with me is, believe it or not, I used to get teased a lot about my freckles. I really did. I used to get teased a lot and I hated
Wow.
it. I hated it. Like I hated it. Being the mixed kid, it wasn't that common back then. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like, and I was the mixed quiet kid. And then, you know, people started testing me, not knowing that my uncle was a pro boxer and he was training me since I was about 8, 9 years old. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like so I started having to come out my shell, and that showed itself in many other ways too. You know, it showed itself in, you know, the form of, you know, transitioning from weed to crack, or, you
Mm-hmm.
know, me carrying guns, or me pistol whipping somebody, or, you know, it manifested in the most unhealthy ways that on the other side of the spectrum helped me survive.
Right.
You know, like because my thing was, okay, if you know what I'm going to do if things hit the fan, and that's what's keeping you away from me to not bother me, then by so be it. Leave me alone. You know, like leave me alone. Because even though I was doing the things that I was doing, I still had a conscience. You
Right.
know, like I still had a conscience, and I still had a very, very loving grandmother that, because of the things I was out there doing, you know, I hated to look in the face. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
here is her perception of her little baby boy, not even knowing like I'm out here, I'm an actual street thug that has put bullets in people, that has sold drugs, that have robbed local stores, that has stolen cars, that has, you know, did all these things, you know. But yeah, I apologize. I believe I strayed away from the original question.
No, no, you're good. Your
Yeah.
flow is really good. Um, so that brought up actually another question based off of what you were speaking on. Did anybody, any of your relatives or your family or, you know, a guardian notice that you had this type of name brand? Anyone ask like where you getting this money from, or just was everything kept under the rug?
I mean, it was like half and half. You know,
Okay.
like
Okay.
some members knew, some didn't. You know, like I remember the first time my mom saw my gun, and I was standing in front of her. I was about 17. I was
Mhm.
standing in front of her. She lived in a separate household, and I was out there with two of my friends. And like this was the weekend. This was the time to get it in. You know, when it was hot, and I wasn't even I wasn't even thinking. So I started like lifting up my shirt, like fanning myself, and like my big gun is just hanging off my hip, and like she freaked out. You know, like she freaked out.
Mm.
She's like, "What are you doing?" She has a very deep fear of guns. Um, Unfortunately, her mother was murdered by one. You know, so that
Mm.
contributes to her deep fear. That happened before I was even thought of. She was about
Right.
9 or 10 years old. And yeah, like, and I remember her reaction, and I couldn't help but think, like, what do you expect?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, I'm out here fending for myself, and then I'm running with a squad who's pretty much in the same position as me.
Right.
We gotta pave a way for ourselves, you know, to live, to eat. You know, like, it wasn't, you know, a lot of people these days, they get in the game for the wrong reasons. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like, back then, it was like you had to survive. It started as survival, and then it started, you know, flat, and then it transitioned into flashy. You know,
Mm-hmm.
So basically, it was just like so much lack in your life that, you know, you used the streets for that. That was the only way that it was the only thing that you taught and you knew. So that's understandable when you start running the streets and put yourself in that type of lifestyle, you know.
right, right, right.
So
Be-
you did mention. I'm sorry. What were you gonna say? I'm sorry. I
now,
interrupted you.
I was gonna say, like, before I moved out on my own, my first apartment,
Mhm.
I remember eight of us, eight of us being crammed into a 2 bedroom apartment, man. Like,
Wow.
eight of us. I mean, I've slept on the balcony on Ash Park Apartments to, you know,
Wow.
to make sure I had somewhere to lay. I had to smoke weed. I hated weed. I hated smoking weed. I had to
Mm-hmm.
smoke weed just to go to sleep. You know,
Mm.
like
Wow.
roaches, bed bugs, you know, stuff like that. And I'm still, you know, I'm still in the streets, but I felt as though I didn't have the resources or the money yet to go do what I wanted to do to finally leave. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
and then, you know, I found a landlord, you know, who didn't care that I was a minor. You know,
Mm-hmm.
he all he wanted was the
For the
money, and that
money,
worked for me.
right?
You
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
that worked for me. You know, my first apartment, I had a 2 bedroom for $600, man. Like,
I wish we could go back to that.
and
I know, right?
I'm telling you, I'm I'm telling you, man. Like, but yeah, like, these unfortunately, I learned most of my smarts in the streets. Like,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of my intelligence was crafted and built because of real life situations
Mm-hmm.
that I was forced in, or sometimes even chose to be in. You know, like, especially
Okay.
when, you know, when you subject yourself to things like that, to a lifestyle like that, then you're opening up a door of a lot of things to come your way.
Right.
You know, like, to, like, by the grace of God, I'm not dead.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, seriously. So I had to use what I mean. Don't get me wrong. I was still going to school and everything. I mean, but Coatesville's so small. Teachers knew what we were doing.
Right.
You know, like, teachers would let us leave class to go make sales. You know, like, they sadly they understood. Especially a lot of them that knew me, knew my story, knew my household, knew my family, knew my mom. Like, it was like nobody could blame me for real.
Yeah. You, you were placed in a situation that was never your fault, you know? So, you
Exactly.
know, you did talk about how, you know, that you would, you know, you robbed people, you shot at people. Was there ever time that you were shot at, you know, or did you, you know, did somebody shoot you at you, or, you know, what were you thinking at those moments when you were in those situations?
Well, I've been shot at multiple times because back then, I'm going to be honest, like, I was a very cocky, egotistical. Like, I was really a light skinned dude. No offense to any light skinned guys out there watching right now, but I was a very like, I would talk because I knew I could back up what I'm saying,
Mm-hmm.
but
Okay.
I had a way with words and my demeanor that I'd make you want to shoot me with
Mm-hmm.
with how cocky and egotistic and boastful that I was. You
Right.
know, I'm gonna give you an example. One time, this dude, man, he got mad at me for giving his girlfriend a cigarette. Crazy, I know. He got mad. So we had some words, and I tried to tell him, like, dude, it's not that serious. You know, just a cigarette. You know, like, you're really, you know, because I had this way of sometimes I would really try to be diplomatic for the other person's safety. because I knew what I was capable of. Like, I knew what I was capable of. And the other person, sometimes they didn't know what I was capable of, or, the name or the reputation that I had ended up, getting and earning, like, so I leave. I was in a bar. I was in a bar. If anyone knows Coatesville, man, they're not carding nobody. Like, I've been in bars since I was 15 years old. So I'm leaving the bar, man. This guy's outside waiting for me. Outside waiting for me. This was out front of the tavern in Coatesville
Over
on
a
the West End
cigarette.
side. Huh?
Over a cigarette.
He's outside waiting for me, right? And I see him holding something in his hand. It's a gun. It's a 25 caliber. I know guns. And I told him, I said, what are you going to do with that? I seen it now. So you either better get me first, or your mom gonna have to bury you. At the time, at this time, for some reason, I didn't have one on me. I don't know. Like, I don't know why, because I usually did. So he walks across the street. He keeps saying, you must really want me to down you. You must really want me to down you. And I told him, I said, you don't got the heart to do it. That's what's wrong with y'all. Y'all mouths don't match your heart. So he started shooting at me. And I lied to you not, as God is my witness. I'm walking towards this dude as he's shooting at me. I'm walking towards him. As God is my witness. I'm walking towards him, shooting at me. And I'm talking smack to him while he's missing. I said, you missed. You missed again. You missed again. And then he ran out of bullets, 25 calibers. They only hold maybe a max of like 6. He ran out of bullets, and he ran to his girl's car, and I ran after him. I later found out that a bullet went through the top of my Timberland boot. And I was like, oh, snap. Like, one of them kind of not pierced me, but went through my boot. Like, it went through the top, like next to the top loop on the Timberland. Like, and I was like, wow. Like, okay, it's all good. Now I know what I got to do. But just to update, me and that man, by the grace of God, we're very cool. I see him all the time. By God's grace, I see him all the time. We shake each other's hands. We were young, man. We were young. We were full of testosterone. We were full of anger. We were full of stuff that we just needed to get out, and we would look for reasons to get it out. Like, but that was just one of the many times I've been shot at. I actually got shot. A bullet finally hit me. It was spring of 2016. It was a very, 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 very stupid situation between me and a guy. And it's crazy, man. I actually found a picture of me and this guy. We were probably like 10 years old with our arms around each other up in Mr. Jack's camp.
Wow.
And so I come out of a bar, and I heard this guy, through the grapevine. He was talking stuff about me, or whatever. And sometimes, most of the time, I would ignore stuff like that. Because in my head, I'm like, okay, you don't have the audacity or the courage to say it to my face, because you know what would happen. So I see him. I'm drunk. And my favorite line, when I'm telling you, I used to act and talk like, I'd make you want to shoot me. My favorite line was like, why the F are you staring at me like I owe you money? And then he just went off. He started talking and stuff. And first thing I think about, I'm like, I know this guy has a gun on him, because he wouldn't be talking to me this way if he didn't. So we ended up in the alley. And I actually had my gun on him first. But at the time, my son slept in the bed with me. So I never kept one in the chamber, because of my son slept in my bed with me. And I pulled the trigger, nothing's happening. The 1 second it took for me to pull my gun back and cock it and load a bullet, I was hit. I was in my stomach. I got shot. There's bullet holes still in this porch post down at this alley where this happened at. And I'm not trying to sit here and sound like this super, macho man. I'm not macho man
No.
Randy Savage, but I don't know. Honestly, like it felt like a bee sting. You know, bullet wounds and injuries, their pain depends on if it stays in, if it hits something, you know, or if it goes in and out, you
Right.
know. And mine went in and out. But when I realized I was hit, you know, I I unloaded my whole clip on this dude. You know, like my whole clip, and I leave the alley, and you know, I'm just bleeding. I'm bleeding. I'm bleeding. I didn't go to the hospital for about an hour and a half later because I was so filled with rage, anger, you know, like I was filled with hate. Like, man, this dude really shot me over what I was shot for.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually went to my friend's house a street over, and I got more bullets. You know, man, it was something wrong with me, man. Like, I got more bullets while I'm bleeding out, and I put more bullets in my gun, and me and my friend, we went looking for this guy to finish the job. You know, like, I'm not going. I told myself I am not going to sleep until I kill this guy. I'm not going to sleep. I mean, I knew where his mom lived, all three of his girlfriends lived. Like, I was the kind of person, like, if we're gonna have a problem, if we're gonna beef, I'm gonna make sure I can get you or get to you. If you ain't here, if you ain't there, if you ain't there, you know. And about an hour and a half, man, I started getting a little lightheaded and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember going to the hospital. By this time, my right foot is full of blood. It's just full
Mm.
of blood, just leaking down my stomach, down my leg. And I walk into the hospital. I know this lady sees this big red blotch on my t-shirt. And
That's
I'm
weird.
looking at her. I said, ma'am, this is exactly how I said it. I said, ma'am, I've been shot. I need help. That's exactly how I said it. She's just staring at me, like with her jaw dropped. And then, like, I just explode. I'm like, yo, this ain't a movie. Like, give me some help. Like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Like, you know, but I have to be honest. I have to be honest, and I have to be transparent. You know, it's one thing to be shot at. It's one thing when the bullet actually hit. I went through a lot of psychological problems after that situation.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of nightmares about, you know, him coming to finish the job. I had a lot of nightmares just about dying in general. You know, like I had, it does something like that really does something, you know, to your mental. You
Right.
know, it had to be because the next night I was back in the bar looking for him.
Mm.
Stomach bandaged up and everything. You know, that's where I was. But I like to also share that that man and I are good friends, man, because of the Lord's grace.
Mm.
You know,
I noticed when guys, and maybe this is just how things typically flow, but I notice when guys go through stuff, y'all duke it out or whatever the case may be, and y'all could be friends the next day versus girls, like we hold grudges or hold
Mm-hmm.
hatred against that person for years, here on
Yep.
out.
yeah.
And I see where that correlates with your stories. One thing I also noticed is you said that, at that moment getting shot, it didn't really feel like anything. I think it's probably also because you were so angry and you had so much adrenaline going through you at the moment that you were just focused on getting him, that you probably
Yeah.
didn't feel the pressure that was going inside of you. Um,
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
there Now, two of the stories that you told us, you said that you were in the bar. Was that a way of you coping through some things, drinking,
Oh yeah.
or
Yeah.
okay?
Definitely.
So go into
Definitely.
that. So go into that. How did you get into, drinking, and uh, was that a part of your addiction, or was that just something that you enjoyed doing?
Well, it was both. You know, it was an addiction before I realized and identified that it was an addiction.
Okay.
You know, I just thought I liked to drink, but there are underlying factors behind certain habits. You know, like there are underlying factors behind something you really like to do, you know, regardless of what it may be. You
Right.
know, I remember my first alcoholic drink. May she rest in peace, my cousin Nia. I probably had to be like 6 years old. And you know, black people, you know, like give their kids alcohol, some of them, you know. And I remember she gave me this drink. She said, "Here, Todd, take the bottle, take a sip." I felt like someone had a blowtorch to my chest,
Wow.
and I was, oh my gosh, it burns, it burns, it burns. I'm like 6 years old,
Yes.
like saying this. And then my uncle, he used to give me Colt 45 a lot when I was a kid. I think I had that when I was like in fourth grade. He used to give me a lot of Colt 45. I hated it. I hated it. But he was with all his friends, and I wanted to be, a cool little nephew and stuff like that. And then it ended up being one of my most, later on, ended up being one of my most favorite beverages, just because it did the job,
Mm-hmm.
and that led to my alcoholism. Like, if anyone knows me in this community, when I was out there, when they saw me, 9 times out of 10, they assumed I was just having a good time. Todd likes to drink. He likes to look good while he drinks. He likes to spend money. But little did they know, I was trying to drown so much stuff, man. Like, I was trying to drown so much stuff, yo. Like, it actually brings tears to my eyes right now, thinking of how bad I was, you know, coming from the home that I did, having the childhood that I did, feeling like I didn't have a purpose. I was trying to heal my scars with the wrong things, and I'm telling you, I would drink 2/5 of something and then go to the bar and spend like $300, man. Like, I can't tell you how many times I done blacked out and wake up in bed and like my car's outside and I'm like, how did that happen? Like, it was a part of my journey that gave the illusion of fun. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it gave the illusion. It was an illusion. It was an illusion. It was an illusion to me. It was an illusion to other people. But even though it was an illusion to me, I still knew kind of what, for the most part, what I was doing. Like, I wasn't one of those drinkers that, I had to drink in the morning or anything like that. But that doesn't mean you're not an alcoholic.
Right.
Yeah.
I was the guy that, oh, I've never had a DUI. I'm not an alcoholic. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I've never drank at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm not an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and as an addict, we justify, we rationalize, we minimize.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because
Excuses.
we can't accept the truth.
Right.
We cannot accept the truth. So my alcoholism, man, it put me through the ringer. It really did. It put me through the ringer. It put my children's mother through the ringer.
Mm-hmm.
It put my family members through the ringer. And, unfortunately, addiction runs in my family, and by the grace of God, I sit here today with over 6 years sober, man.
Yes.
Praise God.
Over 6 years. I'm not one of those guys that I stopped drinking, but I still do pills. I stopped drinking but I still smoke weed. Weed wasn't my problem. No, I'm completely sober from any
Mm.
and all
That's
mind
awesome.
altering substances. I don't put none of that in my body, and it changed my life for the better. I'm telling you.
Mm.
I'm telling you.
That's amazing.
During all your life challenges, could you talk to any of your parents, or do you have anyone that you look up to?
Well, my mother, she had a lot of boyfriends, and
Mm,
there was two that to this day we're very tight. We're very cool. I
okay.
actually do a lot of work with one of them, Hersey and James, and like they were somewhat father figures to me, but there was always that barrier, kind of,
Mm-hmm.
because they're no longer with my mom. I'm not their biological
Right.
child. So like there
Yeah.
was kind of that barrier, and they had their own kids and lives to,
Yeah.
but I mean, James bought me my first cell phone. He bought me my first Sega, my first Dreamcast, my first Xbox. Like, I love this little bald headed dude, man. Like I'm telling you, I hope you're watching, James. I love
Shout
you,
out to
man.
James.
I love you. I love you, man. James Fraser, man. I love you, man. But yeah, like they, they were figures. They were the male figures I never had. But then it was only so much that could be done with their influences in my life.
Yeah.
Especially after they done separated from my mom.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but other than that, like one of my aunts, my Aunt Sharon, if you're watching, I love you. Um,
Aw.
she would literally look like her house was my escape. Her house was my way out of the hood because she lived outside of Coatesville. Like I didn't
Mm,
have to worry about roaches up there or bed bugs up there. I didn't have to worry about there wasn't no food up there or the
right.
lights weren't off. And she actually, I recall childhood memories of her getting into arguments about adopting me from my mother.
Mm,
Like, and she's like my second mom.
mm-hmm.
Like she like to this day, like I go see her like every 2 days, man.
Aw.
Like whatever she needs. I'm trying to send her on a little dinner cruise, and like just I've gotten to the point to just try to give back to those who did, play an important part in my life because the times my mother was going to jail and stuff, people like my Aunt Sharon took me in. I had somewhere to
Mm-hmm.
be. I had somewhere to go. I was clothed. I was fed. You know, but though it wasn't many people. It wasn't many people that I could call on or rely on or look up to. Like I said,
Mm-hmm.
my father was in my life for a very, very short period.
Right.
And he was on the other side of the country. He was in California. Like so unfortunately, I didn't have as many people I would have liked to look up to and grow, and learn from. I learned how to be a man the hard way.
Right.
And
Trial and
it was not a pleasant process. But it does and it did and still does bear fruit by the
error.
grace of God.
That's amazing. Taking a look back at everything that you went through, do you remember what age where you felt like, you just lost yourself and you just didn't want to continue with anything? Where was your
Um,
breaking point?
I'm sorry.
Where was your breaking point?
My breaking point was probably when my father was killed
Mm,
because like all my life I would ask my mother, "Where's my dad? Where's
mm-hmm,
my dad? Where's my dad?" My one of my uncles actually pulled up my father's picture on Chester County's Most Wanted one day. I was probably like 12 years old. He's like, "That's your dad." And I see what he's wanted for, and he fled to Cali and made a new life. So it's crazy because I've never met him in person.
mm,
But the moment we came into contact, he was there for me. From the other side of the country. I mean, UPS was that at my house every other day with clothes and sneakers. Like he spoiled me from the other side of the country.
mm,
He's giving me like $300 money orders every week. Like we had first came into contact when I was in Glen Mills schools. I was serving a sentence up at Glen Mills schools. And every time I was supposed to go down there, I get back in trouble. Like
mm,
I've been in the justice system since I was 12 years old. I'm still currently in the justice system.
mm-hmm,
And when he got killed, the video's still online. I don't know why. It is. He got shot 38 times. Video's still online. And I lost it because the first thing that came to my mind was anger towards my mother.
mm,
You knew where he was this whole time. And now look, I could have had more time with him. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was with one of my friends. We're leaving Walmart. I was living with my Aunt Sharon at the time.
mm-hmm,
And I ride by her and my uncle and I'm waving. They look at me. They didn't wave back. I'm like, man, something's wrong. Now my friend Dan, shout out to Dan, um, he lived right down the street from my Aunt Sharon. So my uncle calls me. My
mm,
uncle Al. He said, "Hey, are you okay?" I said, I'm fine. Why? What's going on? He's like, oh, nothing. When are you coming home? I said, I'll be up in a little bit. Okay. All right. Okay, love you. I told Dan, I said, Dan, something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So my room was on the first floor there. I go in the house, they're sitting on the couch. I'm like, hey, what's up? I go in my room, I go into my shoebox. Back in the day when, us little drug dealers had shoeboxes with all our stuff in it and stuff.
Our
And
stash.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, and I come out into the hallway. My aunt Sharon is standing there, and she's just bawling, like tears. Like I'm looking at her so confused. I'm like, what's wrong? Like, and that's when she told me, your dad was killed last night by the LAPD. He
Mm.
was shot 38 times. And I just stood there staring at her like, what? Just trying to process what I was just told. Because I was actually supposed to go down there probably like the next month.
Wow.
And I remember going back into my room, sitting on my bed. And I believe this is the moment. This is the moment I lost it, because this is the moment I really, really had anger towards God. I
Mm.
really did. This is the moment I resented God. This is the moment I really cursed God. I told God, I said, you knew all my life I wanted my father. You knew how much it meant to me to have him, to have someone that loves me. And that's when something snapped in me, and I took my pain out on the streets.
Mm.
I really did. I really did. I took my pain. I had no regard for anything anymore. I didn't. That was one of those things that I was just like, F it.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff don't happen to me. Good stuff ain't gonna happen to me. I might as well get out here and raise hell.
Mm.
I believe it was maybe. I believe it was maybe like a couple days after that, I went and shot somebody. Not for no reason, but us as human beings, we look for things to dish out
Mm-hmm.
our. We look for things to target to dish out what we're going
Right.
through.
Resentment.
You know, and it took me a long time to even, I guess, become like human again, because I was so mad. I was
Mm.
this close. And then I battled a lot of guilt and shame and resentment of myself also, because if I didn't keep getting in trouble how I was getting in trouble, I would have been down there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I remember my dad told me on a Wednesday, call me this weekend. I said, okay, Dad. I never called him because I was running the streets. He died that Monday night. I battled so much resentment and guilt within myself. Like I couldn't forgive myself.
Mm.
I couldn't. And that was the moment. That was the moment I believe I really became a monster.
Mm.
I mean, just that week alone, usually when you commit crimes, you try to be smart about it so
Mm-hmm.
you don't get caught.
Right.
That same week, I walked into a Chinese store down in Coachfield, down in East End, no mask on, no nothing, about 1 p.m. in the afternoon. And I put a gun to the Chinese guy's face. I said, I will kill you if you don't empty this register. And the fear I seen on this guy's face, maybe before my dad passed, my conscience would have kind of like, spoke up a little bit, but I felt nothing.
Mm. You're numb.
You were
I
numb.
was, to this day, I still watch the video here and there
Mm-hmm.
because that's the closest I'm going to get. It's sad, but that's the closest I'm going to get. But yeah, that was the moment.
when did your transition, when you decided to like, okay, I can't do this anymore, I need to change my life?
I'm gonna give you the date. I'm gonna give you the exact date. It was July 2nd, 2016 is when I was baptized in the name of Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. But to back up a little bit, I got into a fight with my children's mother. It was a night we had a babysitter. Our plan was to meet at a bar, have some drinks, have a good time. My ego, being in Coatesville, I had this thing about, if you was my woman, we walk in together somewhere. So everyone knows, okay, she's off limits, you know? So I go outside because she was saying she was pulling up. I wanted to escort her in. And she's out here talking to this guy she used to mess with. And me being drunk, by this time, I lied to you. I've been probably drinking 10 hours straight. And I snap. I walk up. I start cursing. I'm in there waiting for you, blah, blah, blah. And here's this young dude, who don't really know. Like, I knew him, but he didn't really know me. Maybe through the grapevine. But didn't really know the demon I was inside. And I remember telling him, I'm like, man, I'll drop you right now. Like, there was moments that I was in where my care switch would turn off. It was a survival method. My care switch, my conscience, the little bit of heart I may have had, it would turn off. So I wouldn't feel anything. Guy, he says a couple words, runs across the street to his truck. I raise my gun. I'm about to start shooting at him. She smacks it out of my hand. I got mad because I thought my brain at the time, my unhealthy mindset, my addiction, the things I'm going through and battling, is telling me she's protecting him. When she was protecting me. If I would have did that, I'd still be in jail.
Right.
So we get into an argument. We go back to the bar. My ego, a bit of my hurt. I remember telling her, I said, I'll go in this bar and leave with any female I want.
That pride kicked in.
Yep.
Exactly. It's one of the 7 deadly sins for a reason. So she smacked me. Rightfully so. And I hit her back. I punched her. And she proceeded to call the cops. I took her phone, I threw it in the street. And then I left. But in the course of all that, she said something. She said something that tore my soul in half. She told me I looked like the devil. And that was something my mother told me all my life. So when she said that, it really didn't resonate until I got home. And because of that situation, she took my son and she left. She left. We had an apartment together. She took my son and she left. And out of my catastrophic life, they were the only piece of peace that I had. And I would come home and not even say nothing to her. But she was there. Like, she was consistent. She blocked me on every social media app. She changed her number. I cried myself to sleep for 2 weeks. Every night, I had to go through her friends to try to talk to her, see my son. I would make dinner. I started cooking. I'd make dinner every night, hoping she would pop up, and end up not even eating it because she never came. And then I walked into the mirror. I looked at myself in the mirror, and like for the first, I don't want to say the first time, but it was one of those moments where I really didn't like what I saw. I didn't like what I felt. I left a trail of destruction behind me. I left a trail of pain. I left a trail of hurt to myself and to others. And I said, God, if you are really real, save me, please. If my habits, if my behaviors, if this alcohol is going to do what it's doing, I don't want any parts of it. I don't want any parts of it anymore. And then it's crazy because this is the man that ended up baptizing me. He was my drug and alcohol counselor at Gaudenzia. And I texted him because he's also a pastor. I texted him. I said, Chris, if you're watching, love you, man. I said, Chris, I'm ready, man. I'm tired, Chris. I'm tired, man. And then her and I actually went and got baptized together.
Oh, did you cook
And
dinner that night? I'm just wondering.
huh?
Did you cook dinner? Did you cook dinner that night?
I actually don't remember. I actually don't remember. And then it's crazy because baptism is so powerful. I actually tried a wine cooler on the next day, and my body like threw it up. Like, so I made my sobriety date July 4th. So July 4th is my sobriety date, and I have over 6 years.
Yes.
So that that was, and to this day I visit I don't think I mentioned that I did end up going to rehab. I spent 100 days in Pyramid today, up in Langhorne, and it was the best 100 days of my life, man. I was sitting in there like, you mean to tell me there's places like this where people can take a break from life to come in, sharpen themselves, learn, grow, and then re-enter life with a better chance? I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. And I actually still visit that place to this day. 6 years later, I still visit to, because their cycle is only like every 30 to 100 days. So I visit to tell people, to share the hell that God had pulled me out of.
Yes.
And I have to keep doing that. But, the story doesn't end there.
It's just the beginning.
The story doesn't end there. If anyone knows me, I'm very transparent. I'm very I have no shame about anything I've ever done. I've dealt with these things with God, with me and God. I still even got into some trouble after this whole turning point. I still had things to work on. Like, a lot of people don't even know that I was debating on whether I was going to share this or not, but I got to be transparent. I got to be honest with myself. January 1st, 2019, I was incarcerated again. And I sat in jail for 28 months without trial. 28 months. My grandmother died, and a piece of me went with her.
Wow.
A piece of me really went with her. And it contributed to me doing something I would have never done. And it involved a gun. You know, and God God has been good to me, man. If you don't know, I've been home maybe 18, 17 months, 18 months. I've accomplished a lot in these 18 months, but that's only because of God.
Mm.
They were trying to give me 8 to 16 years for what I did that day, from what my mental nervous breakdown caused.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care that I was dealing with hurt and suffering because I lost my grandmother. They care
Right.
about I broke the law.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I tell you God showed up for me,
Mm.
he showed up for me. And the whole time I was in jail, sober, I'm fellowshipping, preaching, sharing my story because I'm trying to tell people, look, man, we might be away, but it starts in here too.
Right.
Yep.
Starts in here too. I actually created a rough draft of my children's book in there
That's awesome.
because my first day in, I told God, I said, God, I don't know how long I'm going to sit in here. Please show me how to not let 1 second in here be in vain.
Mm.
And he began to show me. He began to show me. And am I perfect? No. Do I still make mistakes? Yes. I'm human.
Right.
But you know what I've learned? I've learned to be grateful that I can never reach this spiritual plateau of perfection where I won't need church anymore, where I won't need prayer anymore, where I won't need scripture anymore. I'm glad that's not even possible
Right.
because it allows us to grow limitlessly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it allows us to remain teachable.
Yes.
It allows us to remain progressive and to keep going.
Yeah.
So I'm blessed, man. I don't deserve his mercy. I don't deserve his grace. But the fact that I am a felon, a successful small business owner, a published author, a father, a mentor, these things were not humanly possible.
Mm-hmm.
Humanly, key word, humanly. God intervened because he heard my plea and he saw my heart and he knew a purpose that he had for me that I wasn't even anywhere close to uncovering.
Right.
Wow.
Like I literally have a judge who calls me when he's having trouble with kids in Coatesville and directs them to me.
Oh, that's amazing.
Wow.
That is God, man.
Mm-hmm.
For me to help people through their hells because of how God got me through mine.
Mm.
To God be the glory.
That's inspiring. That's so inspiring.
Amen.
If you could provide advice for young men today, especially with all the things that's going on with, weed and social media and just everything that we was raised up on and more these days, what would it be for the young men? What advice would it be?
I would have to say to don't work so hard to be cool. Don't work so hard to try to be cool or look cool. Because when you do that, you compromise morality.
Mm,
Most times, you compromise principles. You compromise how God ordained us to live. I cannot tell you how many times there was moments I tried to be cool and it really bit me in the butt.
mm,
You know, you got these kids out here these days It's a really different day and age today.
Right.
These kids are coming from
Yes, it
two-parent
is.
households. They're coming from households that has an accumulation of like $150,000.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like they're coming from good places, love, support, care, and they want to get out here and be cool
Be cool. That's so
by
true.
doing
Yeah.
the stuff that's going to put them in jail.
Mm-hmm.
I lied to you not. I had a friend who dropped out of college to sell crack with us when his dad paid his full ride to Lincoln University.
What?
That's not
Wow.
that's not cool.
No, it's not.
So my advice would be, don't try to be cool, man. Because being cool could give you a life sentence. Trying to impress other people could kill you. It could
Mm-hmm.
give you a life sentence. And it's not worth it. Because when you get into that cell, those people you were trying to be cool for, they disappear.
That's true. You by yourself.
They disappear. I've
Yeah.
been through it. They disappear. One of my friends from preschool disappeared.
Mm,
So don't try to be cool. You ain't got nothing to prove to anybody.
that's right.
God, but God's not going to judge you either way.
That's right. That's good. That's great advice.
And you spoke about when you were in jail, how you started to write a children's book. Can
Mm-hmm.
you can you tell us more about that and
Yeah.
details of where we can find you?
Yeah. Well, I created a Christian children's book titled "Because I Love You," and the theme is children are very inquisitive. They're very
Mm-hmm.
curious.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted a way to ease my son towards God. Him being 7 now,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted a way to ease him towards God in a way that wouldn't be so complex.
Right.
So this book is about 4 different. I actually made my son a character in this book.
Okay.
Um,
Aw.
it's 4 different kids from 4 different ethnic backgrounds because I wanted the book to be able to be picked up by anyone.
Yes.
I
Diversity.
wouldn't want a parent or a child to see, oh, my skin color isn't one of those kids. We
Mm-hmm.
can't get the book.
Right.
So I went through Palmetto Publishing. Um, it's currently on Amazon, Because I Love You. But the theme is children. These children are going throughout their days, asking God, talking to God, asking him, a variety of questions. Why this? How this? And they're doing it in the form of a rhyme.
Mm.
So hence the title, Because I Love You. That's how God responds to their questions, to show them that everything is ordained and created because of his love, even the most simplest things as the sky being blue.
Mm.
That his love is spread equally, no matter if you're black, white, tan, orange, purple, no matter if you're rich or poor. There's actually a section in my book of the black kid where he asked God, like, God, why didn't my dad come back?
Mm.
And God responds, because I love you. Because there is a plan, a master plan that God has. We might only be able to see a small piece of it, but he has the world in his hands. He has
Yeah.
our lives in his hands. So there's certain things that we have been through that were traumatic or a couple of hardships or whatsoever that he turned into a greater purpose. I mean, look at me.
Mm-hmm.
I like to hold up my book. This is what it looks
Go
like.
ahead.
Uh, uh, that,
Mm.
oh, that's my son right here.
Okay.
My son. And I did the illustrations. I did the speech bubbles. I colored everything. I did all that.
That's amazing.
But yeah, it's currently on Amazon. I also ship and deliver. Amazon has it for $13. I sell mine for 10. They gotta take their commish. You
Commission.
know,
Right.
they gotta take their commish. But yeah, it's a project that, you know, hinted at one of my purposes in life,
Mm-hmm.
because I've always been artistic, but I never used my artistic ability to serve the Lord.
Mm.
You know, and that's something that I realized that I got to start using my skill sets to serve the Lord.
Yes. Mm. Speaking of skill sets, before we actually close out, can you tell us about your small business and
Oh yeah,
yeah, let's talk about it all.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
tell us
Let's
about your small business before we close out.
right. Okay, well, after I got out of rehab, I started Todd Hood LLC, and man, it was a rough start, man. I mean, I remember people slamming doors in my face and everything, man. Like I didn't know anything about you can't solicit in certain neighborhoods and all that. Like, but I started off as a painter, so that's what I do primarily. Painting is
Okay.
what I do primarily, interior, exterior, and I also provide lawn care, landscaping, junk removal, power washing, and light home repairs. I'm very transparent. I
Okay.
will not tell you something. I will not tell you I can do something and then, come learn it on your time and dime.
Right.
I'll refer you to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't need the money that bad.
Right.
You know, my business, my overhead allows me to be very affordable because I am one guy. Like, and I'm not motivated by money.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm.
I've literally had customers cry to me because of the money I've saved them, because what I was comfortable making.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not out here to buy a Rolex. I'm not out here to buy a brand new Mercedes. I'm just trying to make an honest dollar to make sure my children are taken care of and to make sure I don't have to revert back to what I know. You
Mm. I
know,
love that.
um, Todd Handyman Hood on Facebook. I'm 5-star reviewed.
5 star.
Um, 5-star
Yes.
reviewed. Yeah. It's crazy because when people contact me, first thing they say is like, "You come highly
That's us.
recommended. Your reviews are amazing," and I'm just like, man, like that's
Them views
awesome
make
because
difference.
Yeah,
like
it does.
I used to be known for different things,
Right.
like, and to have a business. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times people will just give me the key to their house
Mm.
and it's just me in the house. That kind of trust, that kind of confidence in me, like that's God given, man.
Right.
Like now, although all I was a felon. I'm a felon, so I couldn't get a decent job, to provide for my family, So I just started doing that,
Mm-hmm.
like, and I mean, my first week working for myself, I made like $1,500, and
Okay.
because Craigslist has a gig section where people are
Mm-hmm.
hiring like handyman and people for odd jobs and stuff, and that's how I built my clientele. And then,
Mm.
over the years, I've had my very first customer, Tom. Hey Tom, if you're watching, he actually plugged me in. He actually plugged me in with his realtor, and that's how I got in with Keller Williams. And I started doing a bunch of their
Ah,
houses
that's
for them and stuff,
awesome.
and then I
Wow.
started doing a bunch of stuff for Berkshire Hathaway, Remax, and I'm like, look at me, like
You busy.
this
You
dude
Yeah.
who
busy.
came from
You doing
the
it?
streets, like doing this, like
Mm-hmm.
I don't even have to chase down work now. Like
Mm.
I
Wow.
don't. I don't have to chase down work. I just bought a new work truck, like I my small business is paying big bills right
Come
now.
on.
Like
Yeah.
like I just financed my very first car,
Yes.
like
Your small
cuz
business is a
Wow.
big business in hand.
man, I
Come
mean, it's a blessing. It really is. It really is a blessing because God knows my worth. A company
Yes.
doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Exactly.
no offense to anyone who has a 9 to 5. Like I commend you for having that kind of commitment. I couldn't do it. You know, but God has been good to me, man. This journey I've been on as an entrepreneur has opened up so many different doors for me. And I'm actually currently working on a Christian cartoon animation. I'm working on a Christian clothing line. I'm working on an urban clothing line.
Yes.
And I'm also working on an autobiography about my battle with alcoholism. So like God put me on this path to fulfill my purposes, like because
Yes.
this entrepreneurship, it's opened me up to get involved in different markets also.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
That's
That's
awesome.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's so amazing.
Yep.
A
Feels
man
good.
of many titles that God has given you.
And
And
he's gonna be
that is
singing one of these days, right? We're gonna add that
uh-huh.
Listen, let's just say Chris Brown wouldn't be who he was if I decided to jump.
Here come the
Yeah.
cockiness. Here come the
If I didn't jump
cockiness.
off the porch, man, like Chris Brown lucky. He's lucky. He's lucky.
So Todd, we
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on and sharing your testimony. Especially, it's such an amazing thing what God has done in your life, and
Yes.
you know, hopefully someone or somebody, young man or young woman that is running the streets would take heed to your story, because God can do anything
Yes.
to anyone. He can change them in ways that you will never know.
Yeah.
And thank you again for sharing your brave testimony.
Uh,
And there is one question we ask all our guest speakers:
mhm.
what makes you uncommon?
What makes me uncommon is that I was counted out the moment I came into this earth. And guess what? I'm still
Mm,
here. I'm still here.
that's deep.
Still here. By the world standards, I shouldn't be. But I
Mm,
operate on God's standards. So,
come on.
yeah, man.
Yes,
Come on.
I love that. I love that. Shannon, do we have any questions for the viewers?
No questions, just comments. Thank you, Luz, for tuning in.
Thank you, guys. It was an honor. Thank you. I'm about to order this Domino's. Yeah.
You gotta wait. You gotta wait. You gotta wait now. You gotta wait.
What? Oh, snap.
Thank you to our viewers for tuning in, and thank you again, Todd, for your brave testimony and sharing everything in your life and what God is going to do, what God is doing, and what He's going to continue to do in your life.
Yes.
And all I can say is God bless you and everything.
God bless. Thank you.
And to everyone, thank you again for tuning in. As I am closing out, make sure you check out our apparel at www.uncommonwomen.net, as well as make sure you go check out our YouTube channel at Uncommon Women Podcast. Like and subscribe. And also tune in with me September 13th at 7 p.m. We'll be speaking on awareness on sickle cell. I have an amazing guest speaker coming on. Instagram Live at Uncommon Three Women. Make sure you come check me out that day. And make sure you come check us out next week at 7 p.m. for another amazing testimony. And everyone, as always, don't forget, stay uncommon.
And that's right.
Bye.
All right. See y'all.